Bonjour everyone and welcome to a brand new episode of Coffee and Film. My name is Jente and I love to watch films and talk about everything else cinema. So grab a cup of coffee and let's take a little dive into my favorite releases of 2021. So the first film that I want to discuss is probably my favorite of the entire year. Even now I cannot stop thinking about how much I loved it. And it's none other than The Green Knight. It's an epic fantasy film directed by David Lowery and it stars one of my favorite actors in the lead, Dev Patel. Now, I waited like a year for this film because it kept getting postponed and fate decided to make me wait a week longer because when my best friend and I went to the cinema to finally see it, the film wouldn't start. And you can imagine the grief I felt when one of the employees came in and said they couldn't show the film that day, especially because they weren't showing it in a lot of places where I lived. But luckily, the gods answered my prayers and I could go out and see it in a different movie theater a week later. So flash forward 1 week and I'm finally seated in a different movie theater to see The Green Knight. The lights go out. I was so nervous, thinking the film was going to not work again, even if we were in a different theater. But it did work, and oh, was it amazing. Now, for those of you who don't know what The Green Knight is about, I'll read a little plot summary I got from my best friend, Wikipedia. King Arthur's headstrong nephew embarks on a daring quest to confront the Green Knight, a mysterious giant who appears at Camelot. Risking his head, he sets off on an epic adventure to prove himself before his family and court. And what a story it was. It starts out and you see this great hall, which is empty except for a throne where the main character, Sir Gawain, sits on. And he's wearing the attire of a king, and a crown comes floating down from above as the narrator tells of his tale. And as the crown alights, his head erupts in flames. Now, I saw this bit in the trailer, and I did not expect to see it at the beginning, so I got drawn in really fast into the story. So then we go back to the beginning. It's Christmas morning, and he attends a feast at the Round Table with his uncle, King Arthur. And in the meantime, we cut to a scene in which his mother and some other witches perform a ritual to summon the titular Green Knight. And you can imagine what happens next if you've seen the film. And if not, go watch it right now and come back because it's not worth getting spoiled. Now, I wanted to talk a little about the pacing because I've seen a lot of people critique this film for being slow, which I understand. Now, some people might expect this great epic tale of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight with a lot of action, but it wasn't that. And that's what I loved about it. Of course, there's still action in it, but it's more of a spiritual journey, a journey of the self than anything else. You, as a viewer, you go along with Gawain on his quest to confront this being that looks like a tree for some reason. And for me, the slow pace made me love it even more. Every scene, every minute, every second, I was full of nerves and curiosity waiting for what comes next. Especially towards the end where there is a sequence without any dialogue and all you hear is the music and you have no idea if what is happening is real or not. Only to get drawn out of this fever-like daydream and confronted with the end like that. And the score throughout the entire film is absolutely marvelous. I had goosebumps throughout the entire film, so shout out to Daniel Hart for composing such a masterpiece. But yeah, I do love that at the end you don't know what exactly happened to Gawain. I personally got the feeling that he was meant to die and wearing the girdle would only postpone his death, as we see in the dream sequence. And because of that daydream, or whatever you like to call it, Gawain realizes that fame and legacy, it's overrated. Every single night sitting at that round table, their legacy was built on lies. There isn't a way for you to cheat death when it stares you right in the eye. And Gawain realizes that, because for him, he starts out as this young and naive boy wanting to be like one of those famed knights on the round table. But on his journey, he realizes that it's not fame or a legacy that he wants. He just wants to be good. He wants to be brave and be happy with the person that he was in the end. And I think a lot of us can relate to that. And for Gawain, he realizes that he is the only one capable of writing his own fate. There aren't any external forces waiting to turn him into this heroic figure he thinks he is meant to be. Another thing that interests me a lot about this film is that it deals with the conflict between mankind and nature. In the end, nature will win over civilization and bring peace, even if it means losing your head. Now, another really highly anticipated movie that I wanted to get into today is Dune. Now, where do I start with this one? Dune is something I frankly don't know a lot about. I knew it was coming. I knew David Lynch has made his version of Dune in the 80s. I've heard a lot of people say the book is quite hard to read. So all in all, I didn't really have any expectations for it. I knew Oscar Isaac was going to be in it, so you know you're going to enjoy it either way. But then I watched my first Denis Villeneuve film, and I was sold. I watched Prisoners a few months ago, and although it's not one of his sci-fi films, it made me want to see more of his work. After I saw Dune, I watched Arrival, and it's one of my favorite science fiction films. Amy Adams was amazing in that, and I love that it isn't your traditional alien movie. It's more about humanity than about extraterrestrials, really. Denis really gives his own spin to the genre, and I love that about his work. And besides that, I also watched a lot of interviews with one of the actors that is featured in a lot of his films, David Dastmalchian. And I just loved listening to him talk about Denis and talk about Dune and talk about his love for film. And honestly, he's the one guy who made me excited to see it. Like for me with Dune, I love listening to other people talk about it instead of talking about it myself. I like science fiction, but it's not my favorite genre. And because it's something so big, it gets quite overwhelming to me. And with Dune especially, like there's just so much source material and I know nothing about it. Like, I know there's worms, I know there's sand, I know there's spice. Kyle MacLachlan had blue eyes. But why not just leave it to the experts? But I will give my little review of it. And if I can't convince you, I have a whole list of David Dastmalchian interviews that will. To start off, story-wise, I thought it was executed very well for someone who has never read anything in the Dune universe. You get drawn into the different worlds, the different houses, the different families quickly, and you want to know more about the lore. And I felt that way at the end too. I got excited for part 2, and I wanted to know more about the universe of Dune. I want to know more about Arrakis and the Sand People and the whole religion. Excuse me for forgetting the name. Now, I am sad Oscar Isaac died, but he looked sexy while doing it, so I cannot complain too much. Now, at first, I thought Dune was gonna be hard to follow, especially because of all the terms used in this universe, but all in all, it wasn't that confusing. I cannot for the love of God remember any of the words, but Denis made everything easy to follow, so props to Denis. The plot itself was very intriguing. It went slow at times, but of course that's needed to establish the massive universe that Frank Herbert created. So Denis, you better get to work because I'm too lazy to read 6 books. The soundtrack is made by the legendary Hans Zimmer, so you know I won't have anything bad to say about it. Zimmer and Villeneuve both agreed that the music would need to have spirituality to it, a sanctified quality that would elevate the soul and have the effect that only sacred music can. And he used female vocalists and percussion to make this point come across. Hans Zimmer even created new instruments to accompany that feeling. He also said that he mainly based the vocal work on female voices because of the sentiment that the power of the human voice remains constant in any civilization, and that the female characters in the film drive the story, and I couldn't agree more. Now, Dune will only come across the way it's meant to come across if you see it on the big screen. It's impossible to get blown away by just watching it on your TV or laptop screen like I do with most films. It's important to watch it this way so you as a viewer can fully experience the unique sounds of the soundtrack. Denis has made a spectacle of a film, and watching it on the big screen really made me see all the details he incorporated in this story. He's dreamed about making this film since he was 14 years old, and he did a superb job. Now, what is an episode of Coffee and Film without talking about Wes Anderson? Exactly. Now, as I mentioned in the previous episode, Wes was going to release his 10th film that year, and he has yet again created a wonderful piece of cinema. And for The French Dispatch, we see a lot of familiar faces show up in the cast again, like Bill Murray, Tilda Swinton, Adrian Brody, and Willem Dafoe. But we also see some new faces like Timothée Chalamet and Benicio del Toro, which is a really nice addition to this film. Now, this one's a little different from his other films because it's an anthology, and the plot centers around 3 different storylines as a French newspaper creates its final issue. Now, before we dive into these stories, we go on a little sightseeing tour of Ennui, where it takes place. And we get led around by none other than Wes Anderson's best friend, Owen Wilson. He plays the cycling reporter Sazerac. And it's such a cute little bit in the film, especially this one scene where he's feeding a rooftop filled with cats. And he doesn't have a big role in this one, but he just knows how to capture my heart with only 10 minutes or so of screen time. So as I said, The French Dispatch is split into 3 different stories, 3 different news articles from 3 different time periods, starting with The Concrete Masterpiece. And The Concrete Masterpiece is my favorite of the 3, so I'm only going to be discussing this one. And this story, it takes you on a journey through the career of Moses Rosenthaler. He is a painter who is in prison for murder, and while in prison, he paints a picture of a woman named Simone. Simone is one of the prison guards with whom Moses develops a relationship. And his work quickly becomes the talk of the town, aka the art world, after an art dealer wants to buy his painting. Now, I don't want to tell you the entire story because some of you might not have seen it yet, and you really should if you have the time. I personally just love this story the most because it tells the tale of the struggling artist who finds inspiration, who finds beauty in the most depressing place he could be. Also, just the way Wes tells his story, he reforms it from what could be a tragedy into a lighthearted story filled with comedic bits and quirks that you can't help but enjoy. I think it's obvious by now why he's one of my favorite filmmakers and storytellers, and I really look forward to Asteroid City and all of the other films that he's gonna make in his lifetime. And the film is accompanied by a beautiful soundtrack made by frequent Wes Anderson collaborator Alexandre Desplat. But that's not the only music The French Dispatch provided us with. Within the film itself, there is this French pop star the characters mentioned called Tip Top, and he's portrayed by Jarvis Cocker, who is the lead singer of Pulp. And he has been so kind to come out with an album filled with French chansons for the film. And I love every single one of them. I think his version of Aline was my most played song last year, and I'm not ashamed. All in all, I think it's obvious by now why he's one of my favorite filmmakers and storytellers, and I really look forward to Asteroid City and all the other films he's gonna make in this lifetime. Also, Wes Anderson, if you're listening, please adopt me. Now, this next film in my list got met with quite a lot of mixed reviews. And don't sue me, but I'm one of the few people that actually loves this film, and let me tell you why. So for those of you who don't know, Last Night in Soho is a psychological horror film that follows the story of Eloise Turner, an aspiring fashion designer who is mysteriously able to enter the 1960s where she encounters a dazzling wannabe singer, but the glamour is not all it appears to be and the dreams of the past start to crack and splinter into something darker. So first of all, Anya Taylor-Joy and Thomasin McKenzie are 2 amazing actresses. If you don't know who Thomasin McKenzie is, you should. But yeah, she's only 21 years old, and my God, she is so talented. I first saw her in Jojo Rabbit, and she is so lovable. Now, she plays the main character in Last Night in Soho called Eloise, and my God, did she carry this film on her entire back. How are you doing, Thomasin? I hope you're doing fine. Her portrayal of Eloise does not get the recognition, does not get the praise it deserves. Anya Taylor-Joy is also an amazing actress, but Thomasin was a sight to see. And if you don't know Anya, she is in this horror film called The Witch. She's in Peaky Blinders. She played the main character in The Queen's Gambit, and she's literally everywhere at the moment, and I love it. So if you're not obsessed with her, you should be. Now, what I love so much about our main character, Eloise, and the film in general, is that you get to know this girl who is madly in love with an era like the 60s. And she has this romanticized image of London in her head. And in the first half of the film, it gets portrayed through this glamorous lens, and every scene is so much fun. And it all comes crumbling down in the second half, when Eloise starts to see the world for what it actually is. And it's so absolutely devastating. And is this a metaphor for growing up? It's driving me crazy. And you as a viewer, you also grow more and more uncomfortable with everything Eloise does. For example, there's a scene where she goes out to buy a white trench coat and dyes her hair blonde because she wants to look more like Sandy. And she's not the same girl from the first half that you grew to love anymore. And overall, the cinematography and costuming were absolutely gorgeous. Eloise and Sandy are such style icons, and I love the use of colors and the neon lights and the whole aesthetic of the movie. And don't even get me started on the soundtrack. I myself am guilty for romanticizing eras like the 60s and the 70s and so forth solely because I love the music so much. Like, if time travel was real and I could go back, catch a Queen concert and get back here and still enjoy my queer rights, I would. Now, I do agree with some of the critique on the third act, but I do not think it ruined the entire movie. Not at all. Now, I do agree that it was weak and it left me wanting more. I also feel like they could have gone more into the whole Eloise seeing people that are dead aspect and explored her mother's story a bit more. But I still enjoyed the film a lot. I had a lot of fun seeing it on the big screen. The dancing scenes alone made me smile so much. And it gave Eloise a happy ending, and I was so happy to see that. It's what she deserves. So don't be mean and give this film nothing less than a 3.5 stars on Letterboxd, you cowards. And last but not least on my list is Nightmare Alley. And Nightmare Alley is Guillermo del Toro's newest film, and at a whopping 2 hours and 20 minutes, this slow burn of a film noir takes you on a journey through a visually stunning haunted house. Nightmare Alley is adapted from the 1946 novel by pulp author William Lindsay Gresham, who had a great fascination for the US's sleazy carnies, circuses, traveling shows, and magicians with their weird shimmer of the occult. Now, the book has been adapted before, just a year after it came out in 1947. But Guillermo has put his own twist on the source material and doesn't consider it a remake. I haven't seen the 47 version of it yet, but this one really felt true to Guillermo's spirit. The first half of the film takes place in the 40s era carnival, and we get to know our mysterious main character, played by Bradley Cooper, who slowly finds out he has a knack for manipulation. He starts using mentalism to make money off of fooled audiences, and it all comes to a slow but thrilling conclusion in the second half, when he crosses paths with a psychologist played by the wonderful Cate Blanchett. Now, she has, in my opinion, the most commanding screen presence out of all the characters, and that says a lot looking at the other cast members. As I've said before, Nightmare Alley is a slow burn, but it is worth every single minute. The ending just leaves you so satisfied. The entire story just comes full circle in the final moments of our main character. And I honestly couldn't be happier with the way he ended up. I was not rooting for him in this one. And I have always admired Guillermo del Toro's visual style, and he doesn't fail to show it off in this one. The cinematography, the costuming, and the acting are all marvelous. But what else could you expect with such a stellar cast? And besides Cate Blanchett, the film stars Bradley Cooper in the lead. Rooney Mara is there, so I was maybe rooting for a Carol sequel. You will just have to see it for yourself to find out. And it also stars Willem Dafoe and Toni Collette, who are both amazing actors. Guillermo's work never disappoints, although there are no monsters in this one, unless you count the humans. Now, an honorable mention that I wanted to add into this episode is The Suicide Squad. Now, I wasn't really planning on seeing this film actually, because I'm not really into superhero or comic book related movies that much, but my best friend, they are such a big Marvel fan. So when we went to see The Green Knight and they couldn't show the film to us, they dragged me along and I enjoyed it so much I even rewatched it at home. Now, the major reason is probably because it made me fall in love with David Dastmalchian. I mentioned him before, so this has not come as a surprise to those of you who know who he is. But in The Suicide Squad, he portrays Abner Krill, also known as Polka Dot Man, and he really stole my heart. But I do have to say, he is an amazing actor. He's also a writer, and he is very much underrated. Now, for some reason, he has a lot of tiny roles in major films like The Dark Knight, Dune. He's in Ant-Man, he's in Prisoners, he's in Denis Villeneuve's Blade Runner, and he kills in all of them. Or gets killed is more likely. But yeah, if you've seen that first Suicide Squad film and want some redemption, I recommend this one. If you like comic book films, this one you'd have to see. If you want to see Taika Waititi hold a rat, go watch The Suicide Squad. It's funny, it's stupid, it's cool, so go have fun. So this has been the second episode of Coffee and Film. I hope you enjoyed my little breakdown and my little reviews of my favorites from 2021. If you want to share your thoughts, your opinions, or any other film recommendations, feel free to do so. I will leave my link somewhere for you to find them. And I wish you a nice day. Au revoir.